So today is the last lecture on form and genre. So basically after the introduction of literature, we are discussing what kind of genres or what kinds of literature are out there. So today focus on plays and films only. So first of all, what are the kind of uniform components of a play or of a film? We are well aware of what a play is and what a film is. So we always have a character in every film and in every play. We have a plot there, we have a narration there, and then we also have a dialogue. We don't need further explanation about these components because these components are the same as we got to know about in the case of narrative of a novel or a short story. So in a short story or a novel, we have a character, we have a plot, general but and common in both, and then we have narration and then we have dialogue. Two additional things in a play or in a film, they are stage directions and then acts, scenes or shots. If most of the components in a fiction, which is a novel, and in a film or play, if most of the components are similar, then what is the major difference? The major difference between a play and a novel, or a film between a film and a novel, is that plays and films both are meant for either theater or cinema. Novel itself is not written for cinema or theater. And also we get the point that plays are written for theatrical performance while film is made for a cinematic display. All right. So what kind of types of dramas are out there? These are the common types of drama. First one is called dramatic monologue, and then closet dramas, then verse plays, and finally prose plays. Now dramatic monologue in fact is a very initial phase of what a drama used to be. So Robert Browning, who is an English poet, he experimented with poetry in such a way that he created a character in a poem and he made that character speak in a dramatic manner. What do we mean by speaking in a dramatic manner? By that we mean that the character in the poem was speaking on his behalf as well as on the behalf of an assumed character. And that assumed character was a duchess. Okay, so there were kind of two characters in that poem. One was the narrator, okay, the duke, and the other character was a duchess. The duchess was assumed. It did not show up in the whole poem. She never spoke in the whole poem. So in fact, Duke in his own imagination, the narrator, the protagonist, we might call him, the main character, he was speaking on his behalf as well as on the behalf of the duchess. Are you getting my point? So he was imagining duchess to be in front of him and talking to her. Now, because there was an exchange of dialogues between the real character and assumed character, therefore that is said to be one of the initial experimentations with drama. Okay, so because no real dialogue took place, it was the same person talking first on his behalf and then on the behalf of his imagined duchess. because no real dialogue took place, therefore it is called a monologue. But at the same time, there was an exchange of dialogues between real character and assumed character, therefore it is also called dramatic. Okay, so it was a dramatic monologue from that perspective.
It is the author itself talking about his person.
Yes, now the main person, or what we call dramatic personae of the poem, was the author himself. Okay, but of course he was using a character to speak on his behalf. Now this poem was written in 1842. Okay, so you can well guess what kind of experiment he did. So it's not about time, but it's about experiment, that he did this kind of experiment with poetry to create a dramatic element in that. The other kind of drama is called closet drama. Now closet drama is the one which is not written for the stage, and the author never had it in mind that it will be performed on stage. So it is a kind of drama on page.
So how we can identify these things while
By reading it. By reading it. You will get to know in a minute. So John Milton, for example, he wrote in 1671 a drama of that kind, Samson Agonis. And then verse plays is the third kind. Shakespeare is probably the most famous writer for writing verse plays. By verse plays we mean the plays which were totally written in poetic form. And Shakespeare used a form of verse that we are aware of. It is called iambic pentameter. Okay, Shakespeare used iambic pentameter almost in all of his plays that he wrote in verse form. On the other hand, Shakespeare is a classic. On the other hand, in our recent times, still there are some writers who are writing in verse form. Tony Harrison is one of them. But then verse form is not very popular these days. It is a classical form of drama. What is common these days is prose plays. Most of the plays which are being written these days, they are prose plays. It's not just about English language. In fact, all the languages, the plays that we find, they are written in prose. So these are the types. Now some explanation about the components of drama or play. Okay. Now explanation about dialogue. Now plot of a play takes place through dialogue. And this is a very important distinction from a novel. Okay, so when you read a novel or a short story, you do not just find dialogues. Rather, there is a first person narrative here and there. Alright, how many of you have read a short story ever? You have, very good. Which short story did you read? Okay, good. And you? Oh, you don't know the title? Okay. Which one?
The overcoat. The overcoat.
The
Overcoat.
Overcoat. Okay. With Telltale Heart? Okay. And Overcoat. Okay. Any? I think all of you have read short stories here and there. In your intermediate?
times.
Have you read any short story? Where did you do your intermediate from? No, I mean Lahore board. So was there no English book for that? Were there short stories in that book? Overcoat. Okay, that is the one. But then there are other stories in that too, no? There is a book of stories. There used to be a button story, for example. So that is a short story. Gift of Mijai, yeah, very good. You all have read short stories. And what about a novel? Very good. Who said Mr. Chips? Excellent. That is one of the recognized novels by a British writer. And what about The Old Man, the Sea? No? Some of you? Okay, anyways, okay, good. But almost all of you have read Goodbye Mr. Chipping, right? Very good, excellent. So Goodbye Mr. Chips is a example of a novel. If you recall that novel, I'm not sure if all of you have actually read the text itself, but I'm sure some of you have seen parts of it. Okay, so from the very first page, the novel begins with the description of the Brickfield School. Who gives that description? Not Mr. Chips, rather writer of the novel. That is the first person narrative. All right. Mr. Chips also speaks here and there in the novel, right? He speaks with his students, he speaks with other colleagues, all right? So wherever he speaks, that is third person narrative. He has a conflict with the other principal, I don't know what was his name, right? In the office, and kids were standing outside listening. Okay, that was third person narrative, okay? There was a conflict going on and there is exchange of hot dialogue between Mr. Chips and other new principal. All right. Now, think of it. In that novel, the whole story is not told through a dialogue. Rather, there is additional description given by the author as well. But in the case of a play or in the case of a drama, most of the narrative or most of the plot comes to us through the dialogue. And that is an important distinction between a drama and a novel. So even when you watch a drama, almost everything you know about all the characters in a drama on any TV, Hum TV, whatever, almost everything you get to know about the characters is through the dialogue which takes place. That conversation technically is a dialogue, right, among the characters. So this first point over here, the plot of a play or a film for that matter moves forward through dialogue, mostly through dialogue. Even the background is described through dialogues. If the viewers need any background information about the characters, many times even we get to know about that information through the dialogue which takes place among the characters. So you might have seen in the drama, whichever drama you are watching these days, you might have seen there are very often flashbacks. There are flashbacks among the characters. Okay, so a character watches a situation or a scene and then she or he goes back down the memory lane, okay? And we are able to see something from the past as well. Now, for whom that memory is being created? Not for any character in the drama. No character in the drama can see that flashback. Only the viewers can see. That is for us. So the background information also takes place through a dialogue that takes place between characters in the memory of the character that we are watching on TV. Alright? So that is an important distinction that we need to keep in mind, or an important feature of a play or a drama. This example, I don't think any one of you have read this play, A Streetcar Named Desire. If you have read, that is very good. But whatever this example shows, I have already described to you. Okay? This example also shows that some background information about the characters was needed in the drama. So the playwright or the writer of the play, he created a scene where the protagonist meets some of the characters and engages in a dialogue which shows to us or gives to us some information which we needed to understand the plot of the play. Okay. Still, even if there is no first person narrative in a drama, there is something else in drama. Instead of first person narrative, in a drama we have stage directions. In a play, there are stage directions. So when we read a play, or when we read a screenplay, or when we read a drama, here and there, the writer of that play or drama gives some stage directions. So basically, those stage directions are meant for the director of the play. Whenever the play is to be staged, the director will be able to use those stage directions and create that kind of scene on the stage. But you know, those directions are right on the page. That means what? That means those stage directions are for the readers as well. Those who just want to read a play. For example, if you want to read Shakespeare or any later playwright. Now, what kind of directions are there? There are directions which, for example, tell where the action is taking place. What is the time of the day? What is the weather like? Is it evening or morning? Is it dusky, dark, noon? What kind of light is in the room? When you watch a drama on TV, you know everything that is happening in terms of the kind of weather, the time of the day, all that is not accidental. Rather, the screenplay, the writer of the play means those things. Okay, it is raining or it is not raining, things of that kind. What kind of scene is there? It is landscape, drawing room, mountains, where the scene is taking place, so on and so forth. So the stage directions have the kind of almost same value in a play as the value of first person narrative in a novel. Now, we need to know that early modern plays had minimum directions, bare minimum directions. But the modern plays, they have elaborate description and directions. Here is one example. Now, again the same play, The Streetcar Named Desire. Now look at this paragraph. Anybody would like to read it loud? If you can see from here. Can you see from here? Yeah, please. Can you please read it loud?
It is first dark of an evening early in May. The sky that shows around the dim white building is peculiarly tinted blue, almost turquoise, which invests the scene with a kind lyricism and gracefully attenuates the atmosphere of decay. You can almost feel the warm breath of the brown river beyond the timber warehouses with their faint fluorescences of bananas and coffee.
Okay. What is this? This is stage direction, written by a playwright within the play. So a scene is going to begin, and before that scene, the playwright puts this paragraph. So when we as readers read the play with this stage direction, a scene is created in our mind as well. And we can situate those characters within that scene. Alright? So stage directions in a play have the same value as the first person narrative in a novel. Alright? In fact, that reminds me that the first scene in Goodbye Mr. Chips also begins at sunset. It is dusky, you know, evening, and the sunlight is red, and it is throwing its red rays on the building of Brookfield, which is also red. Okay. Now, continuing with some of the features of a drama or a play. So there is a kind of conflict between performance or performers and the real people. Now, this feature comes up only in the case of a play or a drama, especially with reference to the question of performance. So, what happens is the characters who appear on the stage, they have a real life as well. The characters whom we watch performing in a drama, they have a real life outside the screen as well. And we have seen those characters not only in this drama that we are watching or in this play that we are watching, but we have seen them performing other roles as well in other dramas. So they might be a landlord, a rich landlord in one drama that we are watching, but the same character might have performed as a beggar in another drama. Have you observed this phenomenon, all of you? You all watch drama and film, right? Anybody who doesn't watch? You don't watch drama and film?
Yes.
Okay. So rest of you, you have watched ever or no? Okay. So you might have observed this kind of conflict that these characters or performers hold in themselves, which is a character on the screen for one particular drama totally different from the performer or character in another drama. All right. Now we often pass by this kind of phenomenon, ignoring it, not something very important. But people who study and teach literature, for them this is a very significant feeling. Okay, and the name they give to this feeling is called the uncanny. The word uncanny means mysterious. And this distinction or comparison between the character on the screen and the real person, the kind of distinction between both of them or overlapping between both of them, that creates in us what we call the uncanny. Okay, and the uncanny or the feeling the uncanny has been elaborated by many writers, but one of the most important writers is called Sigmund Freud. Who was he?
Psychology.
Very good. He was a
Psychology.
good. He is said to be father of modern psychology. Okay, father of modern psychology, right? He wrote a book on the uncanny. Okay, and he says that we all human beings come across or undergo this kind of feeling in many situations in our lives. Sometimes we experience a situation with which we are familiar, but at the same time we are unfamiliar. So these kind of characters, therefore, they look familiar and unfamiliar at the same time. Okay, so there is a whole tradition of critical theory, or there is whole tradition of criticism inspired by Sigmund Freud. So basically what happens is, you're watching one performance by a character. You have watched a different performance by the same character in another drama. So what is happening? Your current view of that character is being influenced by your previous view of the same character in a different role. In other words, we can say that our consciousness is being influenced by our unconsciousness. Alright, the previous character is in our unconsciousness. We watched it a year ago or 2 years ago maybe. Alright, so there is a kind of contest between consciousness and unconsciousness. Sometimes our unconsciousness tells us, well, this character is not the one you are watching, it is different one. This is the beggar one. But your consciousness will force you to accept that no, this is not the beggar now, this is the landlord now. Okay, so your memory plays tricks with you. Alright, your memory plays tricks with you. Sigmund Freud proposes, and other people who are big literary critics, they propose that we need to take this play of the memory or trick of the memory very seriously, and we need to do an analysis of that. Okay, they call it, if you allow me to use that word, they call this kind of analysis, anybody has that word in mind? They call this kind of an analysis of the memory. Very good, excellent. Psychoanalysis, good. They call it psychoanalysis. Okay, so psychoanalysis is a theory. Okay, it is a literary theory. It has other names also, but psychoanalysis is a literary theory. So people who learn literature, most of them also learn some part of psychoanalysis. Okay, so this was a little complicated. Anyways, so there is an example of the uncanny from the play Macbeth as well. Okay, I think I have already explained that. You don't need to be kind of worried about this example. Only if you have read the play already, you can see this example on your own later on. Okay, so the final point is narration and point of view. Now, narration in a play also takes place through images. So sometimes there are images in a drama or a play which create a certain meaning in our mind. Even if there is no narration by anybody. So one example is that of Macbeth. So Macbeth is a famous play by Shakespeare. It's a very interesting play. I would strongly recommend you to read it. Right in the beginning of the play, somewhere in the beginning of the play, the king is murdered, King of Scotland. And who murders the king? Macbeth, the main character in the play. He murders the king. So, in that particular scene where Macbeth murders the king, he holds a dagger in his hand, and first of all, kills his security guards who were standing outside the sleeping chamber of the king. After murdering them, along with the dagger, he enters the chamber itself and then stabs the king. By the way, the king is the guest in Macbeth's home at that time. Now, when this is happening, when this murder is happening, Shakespeare gives certain stage directions. And one of those directions is that one could constantly listen to or hear or overhear the shrieking of the owls. Also, there was constant lightning, thunder and lightning. Shakespeare does not draw any connection between the shrieking of owls and thunder and darkening. He does not draw any connection between that and the act of murder. But we as readers are aware of the ominous feeling, the bad feeling which shrieking of owls gives, scary feeling or suspense. So images, we need to remember this word for future as well. So images create the narration in a play. In the case of a novel, usually it is the description, detailed description that a novelist gives. But in the case of a play, these are the images which play that role.
Then it makes a statement, so how is we say that Shakespeare does not make that use?
Yeah, in the case of a short story or a novel, the writer's purpose is more clear. You know, we know that the novelist is trying to tell us that I'm doing it on purpose. Okay, but in the case of a playwright, Well, playwright is also doing that on purpose, but the playwright is not explaining that. The playwright will never use the word suspense. But novelist will sometimes say that there was a great suspense in the air, things of that kind. Okay, so that is one distinction. Playwright will try to use as many images as possible. So images become so powerful that the playwright doesn't need to say anything. Okay, that is why they say that when a playwright writes a play or creates a play, he kind of creates an alternative world. That is an alternative world that he creates, which is whole in itself. Okay. Sometimes when you are watching a play or a film or a drama, you are so totally lost in that you feel that you have entered a different world. All right. So that is because of the power of the images. Because there is no language in between. It is the images which control your mind, right?
So it is also because of dialogues, like
Because of
dialogue.
dialogues, yeah, dialogues also create that effect of realism, you know. Does this happen in the case of film as well? That the narration is taking place through images? Yes. The same case is in film as well. With the only addition that in the case of a film, the narrator is the camera. Because it is the camera which captures all these images for us. And we watch it on screen. In the case of a play, it is the playwright who is doing it. The novelist, the writer of the play. But in the case of film, it is the camera. Now, narration has these roles. Narration also makes it possible for us to understand the point of view of the characters and sometimes point of view of the camera. And this point of view could be subjective, it could be objective. Now, because we are talking about film again and again, please remember that when we watch the film in order to analyze it, that act is called reading the film. Reading the film. Okay? And when we read the film, we turn the visuals into text. You know, when you read a poem or a novel, or when you read a text, you have to create vision in your own mind for whatever you are reading. If you are not able to create that vision in your mind, you don't understand it. On the other hand, when you watch a movie or film or a drama, the vision is already in your mind. The challenge is to verbalize it. Describe what you watched. Alright? So when we are shifting to or when we are entering in the domain of drama or film, we should remember that it's not watching for fun. It is reading it critically so that we should be able to verbalize, describe what we watched and describe it in a critical manner. So if you have any questions, you can bring them in the next class. We end the session right now.